Let it go, make my body go. Take our bodies higher and higher and higher. We can go till the morning glow. We can go higher and higher.
Hello and welcome back to Japanglish. I'm your host Ash Hatchett, and in today's show we're going to be talking about the news in Japan, answering some questions, and taking a further look into Japanese culture by seeing how the Japanese New Year was welcomed in Tokyo last week. Before we get started, I want to remind you that if you have any questions that you'd like to ask me or any stories you'd like to share, then you can email me through the show on japanglishshow@gmail.com, and it should also be written in the description. But for now, let's get on to our first news story of the week. Our first story this week is about a Japanese man who killed 19 severely disabled people in a care home outside Tokyo in 2016. Satoshi Uematsu used to work for the care home where he committed the crime. However, in interviews, the 29-year-old had clearly stated he believes disabled people are harmful to society and should be killed. This is an extremely rare crime in the country, where violent crime is almost zero, and the crime was described as being one of Japan's worst in recent years. In court, Mr. Uematsu did not deny any of the allegations held against him and openly agreed that they were true. Despite confessing to the crimes, he also believes that due to his mental health condition, he should not be held responsible for the crime because he does not have the ability to tell right from wrong. Prosecutors believe he was mentally competent despite admitting to abusing drugs and there being marijuana found in his blood after the attack. The attack occurred in the early hours of the 26th of July 2016 when the worker entered the care home armed with several knives and began to attack sleeping residents aged between 19 to 70 individually in their rooms. In addition to the 19 he killed, 25 others were injured, with 20 of the injuries being serious. The court's verdict is expected in March, and I'll try to find more on the story then. Anyway, now on to our first question this week, and is all Japanese candy sour? And I had to look this one up actually, because I have no idea where the idea has come from, but I've looked it up and not really. There's a lot of Japanese candy that is quite sour. Japanese can tolerate sour things a lot better than British people can. But a lot of it tends to be really sweet and very flavourful, I think. Right? I think a lot of Japanese candy and drinks are high in sugar with a lot of fruit in them. And it's all quite sticky, so yeah, a lot of sugar. But all of it is sour, probably a bit of a over-the-top exaggeration, I think. Although there is a lot of sour Japanese candy. Our second news story this week is about Carlos Ghosn, who has not only made news in Japan, but became very known around the world for what happened to him. For those of you who don't know, Japan's justice system is often criticised for being unfair, which admittedly it kind of is. In Japan, people can be held for up to 23 days in prison before being charged, and the majority of the time, people are rearrested within a month, and the cycle continues until they manage to get a confession out of you, really. Carlos Ghosn became famous about 25 years ago as car giant Nissan were going bankrupt. Carlos took over the company and single-handedly managed to save them and got them to where they are now today. He became very well known internationally and remained a good businessman until recently. A few years ago it was found that he was using company money to buy luxury items for himself, such as homes in France, Brazil and Japan, to name a few. This was obviously seen as being quite sketchy by the nation in many places, and decided to stay in Brazil for a while, in hiding. Sometime later he went to Japan, was immediately arrested in the airport and given a prison sentence within 24 hours, and he was let out within the last few weeks, and it had been reported that he had completely disappeared from Japan to escape the justice system, and he had. The media had seen what looked like some sort of band entering his house, and it is suspected that he left inside one of the instruments. Being the billionaire that he is, he had a private plane waiting for him at the airport and was able to leave very easily, and he left for Lebanon, a country that does not have any extradition agreements with Japan. For the last week he has been staying in his home in Lebanon and reportedly left Japan to escape the pressure and flawed justice system. I'll try to have more on Carlos Ghosn in the next episode, but for now, let's take a look at the Japanese New Year. Now, this is a special week because we have just welcomed in the New Year, and for this reason, I thought we'd take a look about how Japan celebrates New Year. In Japan, the New Year is actually the most important holiday they celebrate, seeing as Christmas isn't a very big thing in Japan, like I talked about in the last episode. The majority of businesses are shut between the 1st and the 3rd of January, and the time is often spent with their family, so I guess they miss out on Christmas most of the time. It's also traditional to eat buckwheat noodles, as they represent longevity in Japan. Typically, people have bonekai parties, which translate to year forgetting parties, and it reminds people that the new year is a fresh start, which I thought was quite a nice way of celebrating something. So get rid of all the bad things and remember that it's a fresh start and everything's new. It's all a very good idea, I think. On the 1st of January, people often visit a shrine to bring them good luck, with the most popular of the shrines being Tokyo's Meiji Shrine, attracting millions of tourists every year. Along with this, many dishes are served for the special occasion. So there's just a short insight into how the Japanese people celebrate New Year. Comment of the week. Not worth the 20 minutes, I couldn't even stand 20 seconds because you can't hear the voice. That music is very loud at the start and your voice is very boring. Please redesign the logo, and also when you read the script, can you actually read it, because there was times where you just stopped. Smiley face. Well, I can actually read the script, and seeing as my voice is very boring, I don't care. Can I read the logo? Unfortunately not. I'm not redesigning a logo just for one person. And can I actually read the script? Yes, you've kind of answered your own question there, I really think, because I've just managed to read your comment. So thank you very much for your useless opinion. It has been taken into account and dismissed immediately. Now on to our second question of the week, and we've got, do you have to know Japanese to live there? And this is a bit of a difficult one, because while a lot of people in Japan are taught English in school and are very good at English, you will often find that Japanese people aren't confident with speaking English, which is a bit of a shame, which means you will have to know some Japanese to be able to go there, I think. If you want to go on holiday, I think the basics will do. But as for living there, while a lot of things, especially in cities such as Tokyo, if you're going to see it in a different language, the other language will be English. But that's not always perfect English, and not everything is in English, so you can't really rely on everything being in your language. And it really does help to be able to speak some Japanese because you'll make the Japanese people that you encounter feel a lot more comfortable if you're speaking their language rather than having to make them stress out about understanding you and trying to speak a language that they don't really understand properly. So, as long as you're moving to a city, you don't need to know Japanese. It would help a lot to learn a bit, even if it is just a tiny bit. But I don't suppose you need to. If you're moving out to somewhere more rural, like the countryside, I would very much suggest learning Japanese because signs aren't really going to be in English because you don't get a lot of tourists out in the rural Japanese countryside. So if you're moving to the countryside, you will definitely have to know Japanese, but otherwise, you could probably get away with the bare minimum, although I do suggest learning some. That's all we've got time for. Tell me what you think of the show in the comments section below, along with any questions or stories you might have, and I'll try to answer as many as possible in the next show. And don't forget, you can email me through the show, japanglishshow@gmail.com if you'd rather, and I'll be here at the same time next week to do it all again. See you then!
Let it go, make my body go. Take our bodies higher and higher.